At 8 o'clock there was a concert and a presentation of the silver boot, modeled after the style of the now famous washstand boot. Apsley was elected to the United States House of Representatives for 2 terms. He was in Washington from March of 1889 to March of 1893. He declined to run again. I think he was encouraged to, but he realized that his business interests here in Hudson needed him, so he returned to Hudson. Mr. and Mrs. Apsley occupied their new home in 1905, and many of you might be familiar with that famous mansion that we have here in the town that was so beautifully restored a few years ago, and is still for sale, as a matter of fact. And at the time of his death in Panama in 1925, the Firestone Apsley Company was very prosperous and employed over half the working people in Hudson. The News Enterprise, the local newspaper, wrote of him, he loved his family, his employees, and the town of Hudson. His death brings a real loss to the community. His was a life the success of which came from honesty, integrity, and humanity. So I am sure that he was greatly missed. After Mr. Apsley died, Harvey Firestone purchased the remaining stock from Apsley's estate and changed the name to the Firestone Rubber Company. In the mid-1930s, the company was sold to United States Rubber and eventually closed its doors in 1936. We can still see the Firestone smokestack today. That was, of course, the building is still there, much of it, used by the Hudson Log Company. And it's believed that the smokestack is one of the tallest structures in the town of Hudson. There was one kind of funny thing that I thought might be interesting to you about Mr. Apsley and his new house. That I was going to read directly from this paper that was given to the Historical Society. At the time the Apsleys occupied their new house, there was an unsightly passenger station and freight building between Felton and Pope Streets, the central Massachusetts station of the Boston and Maine Railroad. Mr. Apsley felt it distracted from the neighborhood and consulted with railway officials. This rail service of the Boston and Maine was operating at a loss. Although the Waltham station furnished the only large volume of passenger traffic, the Apsley Rubber Company was the only business which shipped freight loads of rubber footwear to Midwest and Pacific Coast wholesalers. They refused to make the improvements. So, the Boston and Worcester Street Electric Railway would also solicited Mr. Apsley for a share of his freight shipments. Upon completion of their station at the corner of Washington and South Streets, he shifted all his company business to that line. When the Boston and Maine learned that there was nothing to be picked up in Hudson, their officials immediately called Mr. Apsley and soon found out the reason. They asked if he would resume shipment if they built a new station, and it was agreed. So of course he honored his commitment to the Worcester Electric, but he did go back to Boston and Maine. So not only were they willing to make improvements at the station, they asked if he had seen any station which appealed to him. And he apparently said that he did. On one of his many weekend visits to former Governor McCall's house, the Wedgmere station in Winchester was very attractive. This was duplicated in Hudson and is now the professional building. Wow. So I hope that explains the significance of the move and some of the importance of the Apsley Rubber Company and the Apsley to the town of Hudson.
Thank you so much, Ellen. Does anybody have any questions for Ellen about Mr. Apsley or the boot, or that was very...
Actually, it was kind of fun doing it. It was more work than I thought it would be.
Oh, really? I'm sorry.
Oh, no, actually it was good, because then I learned something about Mr. Apsley and doing this research that actually was beneficial to me too. And, gave me kind of a different appreciation of him and how he was so thoughtful to his employees. He really did treat them like family, and you can see why they certainly respected him.
Yeah, and now I have to open up accounts for those 3 women over there. Right.
We also have his congressional desk in our museum.
Okay, really?
Yes.
Do you have other
examples of the rubber goods that they made?
I'm sure we have something, but not a whole lot. by Harriman Reardon, a truckload of clothing that belongs to Mrs. Apsley, and other items that are in the clothing items. And we did have a display of that a year or two ago. So it was very nice to have. Appreciate it. And I have pictures of the mansion.
Would you? Yeah, well, we can actually stick them up on the table too. I think they're different. We want to infiltrate the mansion, the Arts Alliance, and take it over. Does anybody want to donate the mansion to the Arts Alliance?
One of these meetings there, I would probably.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Great.
These are all things about the mansion.
Thank you.
I'll just tell them one thing. One of the items in here, you probably won't have time to read the whole thing. This is a newspaper article from when the mansion first opened, and it describes in extreme detail what an impressive place it was, including telephones in every room, closets with lights on them. Apparently the lights came on and opened the door and went out and closed it.
What year was that?
Well, they occupied it in 1905. This paper is dated December 22nd, 1905. So I think the construction started sometime around 1900. But I'll leave this up here.
Thank you. Thank you. Hudson. Now we would like to welcome Mary and Alice. Are they both coming up? Or Mary's okay? Mary Ciummo from the Bolton Historical Society.
And we'd like to thank the Arts Alliance for inviting us to be part of this, because I really think it's an exciting thing. But what we have chosen to bring today is Bolton's Town Seal. And this is the actual sketch of the seal. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. I've also made copies that you can pass out, just to make it easier for the artists to have for reference.
I'll just slide it on the side if you want to start.
Well, Bolton Town Seal, I like to compare it to a multifaceted jewel from which reflects many unique aspects that make up the town's identity, and that's both in the past and the present. In the center of the seal is a very simple sketch of the Powderhouse, which is a tall, oblong, windowless structure constructed of bricks made at a Bolton brickyard. The Powderhouse held the town's gunpowder and other ammunition. Up until 1812, these volatile substances used to be kept at the meeting house, and at one time they were stored under the pulpit. And Alice, what is the joke about short sermons? But the Powderhouse still exists today, sitting on a ledge high above overlooking the town center, and it's easily accessed by a conservation trail. The treasure of Bolton is it's over 2,000 acres of conservation protected land on which there are many walking and biking trails. Encircling the image of the Powderhouse is the town name and its incorporation date, which is 1738, 275 years ago. And the town is busy planning a host of celebrations that will run from June to December of this year to celebrate the 250th. The seal itself was drawn by Evangeline Young, a young woman from Maine who was hired by the town of Bolton in 1899 as a teacher and principal at the Houghton High School. The Houghton building, while no longer a school, still stands on Main Street and presently houses library book sales, the local access TV station, and the Conservation Trust. Besides her duties at the high school, Evangeline taught drawing at the 3 primary and intermediate schools in Bolton. Like all proper ladies of her time, Evangeline was instructed in the art of drawing as a young girl. She lived and worked in Bolton for only 1 year in order to raise money to attend medical school. And it's from here that her resume becomes quite impressive. Evangeline was a doctor, a suffragette, an environmentalist, a teacher, and an artist. She practiced medicine in Boston after graduating from Tufts University in 1906, but also lectured and taught courses at Dana Hall, Pine Manor, and Wheelock College. In 1912, she founded the School of Eugenics, which was later taken over by Tufts. She became a very well-known doctor for women and children. She started a clinic for poor families and held classes for mothers to help them to understand better and proper nutrition. Her writings were published in the Medical Review and the Women's Medical Journal, and her articles on heart research can be found in both Harvard and Tufts University's libraries, medical libraries. She lectured across the country about family planning and birth control, and taught sex education in schools, and this is at the turn of the century. And she expressed a concern about overpopulation and pollution. But it was that one year that she spent in Bolton that Evangeline left an indelible mark on our town. And thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. What was the last name again, Evangeline?
Evangeline Young.
Oh, what an amazing story, huh? She's
Extraordinary woman. Any questions?
Did she own a house or just ran?
We don't know where she lived. We do know that there was some connection to Bolton. She did have a niece who did teach in Bolton, and actually it was a niece that gave us, we have quite a large collection of certificates, diplomas, lectures, letters on birth control advice to some students, really photographs. We have a large collection of her possessions. Very interesting.
She sounds remarkable. I would love to meet her. I don't think she's she had a lot to
For
say.
a woman at that time, but anything else?
Any other questions, anybody? Do you have a picture of her anywhere?
We do have a picture, and you know, we were on the fence about incorporating that, but then we didn't want to muddy, the sketch or the picture, or
Right.
so. But yeah, we have several photos of her.
And some people give her a hard time about her teaching such subjects in those days.
She actually was threatened many times because of
Where's the building? Behind what building is it?
I'm sorry?
Behind what building is it?
The Powderhouse sits behind the town hall. And, during her time period, it was probably very visible. But now, the woodlands have grown in. But it's on a conservation trail, and it's very easy to access. And actually, it's a steep hill behind the town hall, but it's in the winter you can see it if you're at the base.
I used to take my kids climbing up that.
I'm sorry?
I used to take my kids climbing up that bluff.
Yeah.
It's very exciting.
It makes me wonder if Dr. John Rock of Marlborough ever encountered this woman. He's credited with inventing the birth control pill along with Pincus, and he was a devout Catholic, and the suffragettes really brought him on board for their cause for birth control because he went to church every day, and he, thought that, this was needed. So it'd be interesting to see if there were lectures together or any encounters, because they lived so close. And both were in the medical.
Same time period?
No, he was later though. Was he in the 50s?
Well, he lived a long life. I know he was probably around in the 1960s. She was around in the turn of the century.
When did she live?
I'm sorry?
What were her dates?
She taught in Bolton 1899, just for a year.
So do you know how long she lived?
I don't have that information. I mean, we have the information at Sawyer House.
Yeah, exactly.
I do know that she never married, and she did her practice in Bolton throughout her, not Bolton, Boston throughout her life.
The Sawyer House is such an interesting, if you haven't been to the Sawyer House or to the Hudson Historical Society, or any of them, take the time to go. It's just really fascinating. I think one of the things that I learned in your play, and it struck me, is that pit bulls were such a big, remember you have pictures of a lot of wealthy families with pit bulls, and they were very prestigious to have a pit bull,
Well,
right?
but they were Staffordshire Bull Terriers back
I'm sorry. They were Staffordshire Bull Terriers back then. But, you know, they have such a horrible reputation now. It was staggering to see how many people had pictures with their, what are they, Staffordshire
Bull Terriers.
Yes, yeah.
We have the licensing book for dogs from the late 1800s right through to the 1900s, and so it's interesting to see the breeds, you know, what breeds were popular at what time, and the names, it's really kind of neat. But the Staffordshire Bull Terriers were very popular at the turn of the century, and we have some charming photos of this one dog. What is the dog's name?
Dawn.
Dawn, with his studded collar. And the owner took a Victorian parlor chair outside, and Dawn is sitting upright on the chair.
You know, that would be a really nice visual drawing.
But anything else about our town seal?
Sorry to make you take up the trash. I just thought that was weird.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mary. And next up, we have, sorry, I just want to make sure I say everybody's name, Diane Newton from Harvard Historical Society. Thank you.
Let's see.
Well, I'm happy to be in this beautiful building. I love this building, and I've never been up here in the hall. It's magnificent. Second Empire French, gorgeous. And I love the Apsley Mansion, and I was so happy to hear about him. What an amazing person. Absolutely beautiful house, which is on the market right now.
She's in real estate.
So I need you to hand out.
Sure.
I'm an architecture person, and so naturally, I'm talking about a house. And the house is in Still River, as you'll see, in the village of Still River. And it has 2 points of interest. One is who lived there for a short while, and the other is the architecture of the house itself. So first I'm going to talk about who lived there. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar, I hope everyone here is familiar with Fruitlands Museum. And at Fruitlands is named after a commune that was formed by Bronson Alcott and all his transcendentalist buddies. And of course, it totally failed after several months. It didn't even last a year because they were going to live off the land. And they weren't farmers, they were philosophers, and they didn't quite make it. So they had to leave. They also didn't have much money. So the Alcott family needed a place to live quickly, and they rented one farmhouse, and then they had to leave that one shortly, and they went into the village of Still River, and they rented this house.